Good afternoon, distinguished delegates.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Distinguished delegates, esteemed organizers, honored guests, and fellow advocates for change. It is both a privilege and an urgent responsibility to stand before you today as we gather to discuss one of the most critical issues of our time: criminalizing reprisals against the natural environment. The earth has given, it's a God gift. Earth has given very good environment to us. In the face of unprecedented environmental degradation and climate change, we must be clear in our message that the destruction of the Earth's natural system is not merely an unfortunate byproduct of human activity. It is an affront to the very foundation of life and our planet. As we enter the 21st century, the threats to our natural environment are intensifying, like forests are razed, rivers are poisonized, and oceans are acidified, and entire ecosystem pushed to the brink of collapse. The impacts of these actions reverberate across generations, affecting not only the flora and fauna with whom we share this planet, but also our own survival. It's very important. We have to survive with the Earth's environment. The consequences of environmental harm disproportionality affect vulnerable communities, often in the global south, while contributing to instability, resource conflicts, and social unrest. This is not just a matter of human rights, of biodiversity, it is an issue of justice. The reprisal against nature through acts of deforestation, pollution, resource exploitation, and ecosystem destruction is a threat to the common good of humanity for too long. We have considered environmental damage as something to be managed. We have to manage this one very importantly rather than something to be prevented or punished. It is time to recognize that such actions must have consequences. The protection of our environment is not an abstract, it is an ideal. It is a moral and legal imperative. As we all know and observing on the environmental degradation and climate change on the globe is rapidly going on, and the temperature is also increasing year by year. Here, very important thing is criminalizing environmental reprisals through laws, acts, with consulting the earth and environmental researchers throughout the globe. The case for criminalizing environmental reprisals, the concept of criminalizing environmental reprisals is not a novel one. It builds upon existing international legal framework, such as the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Paris Agreement, and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This was the Paris Peace Agreement, the Paris Agreement. In this, 196 countries are involved. Then, again, 2015, 2016, finally 2023, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and Biological Diversity on the globe was held at Paris under the banner of the Paris Peace Agreement. However, These agreements alone are insufficient without real consequences for those who deliberately harm the environment. These treaties lack the force necessary to alter behavior at a global scale. We must begin by recognizing that environmental reprisals acts are intentional harm to the earth can no longer be tolerated in the same way that human rights abuses or war crimes not tolerated. Just as the international community has come together to criminalize acts of violence and injustice against humanity, so too must we forgo a legal framework to penalize those who commit acts of violence against the natural world. This shift requires rethinking what it means to harm the environment. It is not enough to rely on voluntary compliance with the sustainability practices or to treat environmental destruction as a civil matter. Climate change is a clear and present danger driven by industries and governments that continue to exploit natural resources with impunity. Reprisals against nature manifest in actions such as illegal logging, oil spills, wildlife trafficking, deforestation, and the unchecked burning of fossil fuels. These activities disrupt ecosystem, displace indigenous populations, and fuel further environmental crisis. By criminalizing these actions, we send a powerful message. The environment is not a mere backdrop to our economic pursuit. It is a living entity worthy of respect and protection under the law. Because the role of law should be considered internationally for any individual, continent, countries, or a state. For environment, for living entity, of an good environment for the entire earth protection. The role of international law and enforcement. While the framework for environmental justice exists, enforcement remains the central challenge. International law must evolve to recognize that environmental harm is not merely a local issue. It is a global concern. As we have seen with climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss, the damage inflicted in one part of the world often reaches far beyond borders of the any other countries. To criminalize reprisals against nature, we must establish international standards and mechanisms for ensuring that no state, corporation, or individual is above the law when it comes to the Earth's protection. This brings us to the question of enforcement. The laws we propose to create or strengthen must come with robust mechanisms of enforcement backed by the international community. Nations must be held accountable to environmental standards, and the violators must face the full force of international justice. We cannot allow industries or governments to ignore the environmental toll of their actions without facing penalties that are as serious as the harm the past. Moving forward, together, we call for action. There is a call for action now. It is a time to take a decision as delegates of the model United Nations. You are the future leaders of our world. Your role today is not just to debate the conference, but to shape the future. Criminalizing reprisals against the natural environment is not a decision that can be left to a few world leaders or to governments alone. This is a collective global responsibility. That is, all countries, continents, states, and human communities. To take meaningful action, I propose three critical steps that we can begin working towards immediately. Number one is establish clear legal framework for environmental protection. It is essential that we move towards universal laws that recognize environmental harm as a criminal act. This includes strengthening the United Nations Environmental Program and integrating more rigorous environmental classes into international treaties. Number two, implement accountability mechanism. Strong system must be created for investigating environmental crimes and ensuring that those responsibility for harming the International Environmental Court, which would prosecute environmental crimes similar to the International Criminal Court. Number three is the encourage global collaboration and policy changes. No nation can protect the environment in isolation. We must foster international collaboration, sharing knowledge, technologies, and resources that support sustainable development while holding industries and nations accountable for their environmental footprint. With these three critical steps, I am going to conclude my speech. The clock is ticking, but the earth is rotating and tilting towards the western side from the north pole. The entire globe is tilting. Because of that, we are getting a lot of heat on the surface of the earth. This is environmental concern and increasing the temperature also. The window of opportunity to reverse the damage done to our planet is rapidly closing. Today, as we gather under the banner of the United Nations, we must commit ourselves to the idea that the natural environment is not an expandable resource to be exploited, but a shared inheritance that must be protected at all costs. To criminalize reprisals against the natural environment is not just to pass the laws, it is to affirm that our responsibility to extend beyond ourselves and our borders. It is to declare that the health of the planet is inextricably linked to the health of humanity. It is to ensure that future generations inherit not a dying planet, but thriving earth. Let us rise to this challenge together. All the participants, I request, let us rise to this challenge together. And thank you. And I thank particularly Principal Saint Joseph, Professor Maruti, and Dr. Sridevi Krishna, and Abhijit, Kundi Anya, and finally Syed Udrat.